Welcome to lecture series on advanced geotechnical engineering being offered by the Department of Civil Engineering, IIT Bombay, Professor BVS Vishwanatham. So, we are in module 4 and lecture 6 on stress strain relationship and shear strength of soils. So, in the previous lecture we introduced about Mohr-Coulomb criterion and then introduced also the PQ space, and in this lecture we will try to discuss more about the Mohr-Coulomb failure criterion and then interpretation and its correlation with the PQ space, and further we will concentrate on definition of failure and interlocking concept and its interpretations, that is definition of failure particularly as far as the friction is concerned with interlocking concept and its interpretation. So, as we discussed in the previous lecture, we can actually express the principal stress relationships at failure as follows: sigma 1 is equal to sigma 3 tan square alpha plus 2c tan alpha, where alpha is equal to 45 plus 5 by 2 and which is also called as the failure plane inclination. And in case if we are having sigma 3 is equal to, in another way, as sigma 3 as the major and sigma 1 as the minor, where sigma 3 is equal to sigma 1 tan square 45 minus 5 by 2 minus 2c tan 45 minus 5 by 2. Now, the Mohr-Coulomb idealization of geomaterials, if you look into it, we have a sample, a cylindrical sample subjected to principal with stress sigma 1 dash and sigma 2 dash and sigma 3 dash. So, here as being sigma 2 dash is equal to sigma 3 dash, in Mohr-Coulomb idealization what has been assumed is that sigma 2 is equal to sigma 3 has been assumed, or sigma 2 dash is equal to sigma 3 dash, and this is the stress strain variation deviatoric stress versus axial strain, where axial strain in the direction of major principal stress. So, this is the idealization and the slope of this is the elastic modulus, and this is the curve which we may get experimentally, and this is idealized in this fashion it is shown. So, as we have discussed the Mohr diagram and Coulomb envelope, if you look into this, Coulomb has given during the investigations of retaining walls an equation which is actually called as tau is equal to c plus sigma tan phi, and Mohr envelope actually has given as the tau is equal to function of sigma, and this nonlinear envelope, this nonlinear envelope is actually for Mohr-Coulomb Mohr envelope, and this one is for the Coulomb equation. So, this actually has been idealized to a straight line, and Coulomb in his investigations of retaining walls proposed a relationship tau is equal to c plus sigma tan phi, where c is the inherent shear strength also known as the coefficient c, and phi is the angle of internal friction. So, the criterion contains two material constants, yes, c and phi, and which are actually called as shear strength parameters, and there are different methods to determine these shear strength parameters in the laboratory. They are primarily called the direct shear test and triaxial test, and the triaxial test actually has got the four different classes you can say, and the first category is that where we do a triaxial test with no cell pressure, then in that case it is actually called as unconfined compressive strength test, it is called UCS test. And when we do this test with a cell pressure, that is unconsolidated undrained triaxial test, and when we do the triaxial test by allowing the consolidation during by allowing the drainage during consolidation and no drainage during shear, then it is called consolidated undrained triaxial test. When we allow both the drainage during consolidation as well as the shear, it is called consolidated drained triaxial compression test. So when we do this, as we have discussed it, that when we do at different cell pressures, we get the different sets of Mohr circles. If you are interpreting in terms of total stresses, we will get total stress envelopes. If you are actually interpreting in terms of effective stress parameters, then you will get the effective stress envelopes, and with that we will be able to get the C dash and phi dash. So here in this particular diagram, where the Mohr envelope is actually shown along with the Coulomb envelope, and with the slope of inclination is phi, and the alpha f is that failure plane. So the criterion basically consists of, Mohr Coulomb criterion basically consists of two parameters, that is C and phi, as opposed to one material constant for the Tresca criterion. As far as the Tresca criterion is concerned, and there is only one material constant. So yielding and failure takes place in the soil mass when mobilized axial shear stress at any plane tau m becomes equal to the shear strength tau f, which is given by. So yielding and failure takes place in the soil mass when mobilized actual shear stress at any plane tau m becomes equal to, when tau m becomes equal to the the shear strength tau f, which is actually given by tau m is equal to C dash plus sigma dash n tan phi dash is equal to tau f, where C dash and phi dash are the strength parameters. Then we can write this as in terms of function of sigma dash as tau minus sigma n dash tan phi dash minus C dash is equal to 0. So this we have written in terms of function of sigma dash, we have written like tau minus sigma n dash sigma dash n tan phi dash minus C dash is equal to 0. So one point we need to note here, in case of the Mohr Coulomb idealization, we have discussed it that because of the the non-consideration of sigma 2 dash, as can be seen here, when we have sigma 1 dash and then sigma 2 dash, when with sigma 3 dash with the minor principal stress, this Mohr circle is actually is in contact with the failure envelope. So where sigma 1 dash is greater than sigma 2 dash greater than sigma 3 dash, and here note that the value of the intermediate principal stress does not actually influence the failure. So this particular the value of the sigma 2 dash actually does not actually influence the failure. So in the case of Mohr Coulomb idealization, the intermediate principal stress sigma 2 dash is neglected. So further into the Mohr Coulomb idealization of geomaterials, and in this we consider a tau versus sigma, and where you have got a Mohr circle, and you have a sample which actually has got if the sample is homogeneous, we actually have got the conjugate failure planes in both the directions, and you can have a failure plane in this direction and you can have a failure plane in this direction, and with that here this is the failure plane, and parallel to this is the failure plane inclination which is actually shown here. And so we can write from the geometry of the Mohr circle by considering a Mohr circle tangent to the line, that is a stress state associated with the failure, that is at this point, and using the trigonometric relations, the alternate form of tau is equal to C plus sigma f tan phi can be obtained. So in terms of principal stresses, it can be written as tau f is can be seen as tau f is equal to sigma 1 minus sigma 3 by 2, and sigma f is equal to which this point is nothing but sigma 3 plus the sigma 1 minus sigma 3 by 2. So if you look into this will become sigma 1 plus sigma 3 by 2. So this point is sigma 3 0 to, it measures an ordinate of sigma 3 dash, and this point actually measures this distance, so that is actually obtained as sigma 1 plus sigma 3 dash by 2. So we can actually write this in terms of principal stresses, sigma 1 minus sigma 3 dash by 2 is equal to C dash cos phi dash plus sigma 1 plus sigma 3 dash by 2 sin phi dash. So when we put this in one side, and we can actually write f is equal to sigma 1 minus sigma 3 minus sigma 1 plus sigma 3 sin phi dash minus 2 C dash cos phi dash is equal to 0. So that is what actually it has been stated here, where f is equal to sigma 1 minus sigma 3 dash, sigma 1 dash minus sigma 3 dash minus sigma 1 dash plus sigma 1 3 sigma 3 dash sin phi dash minus 2c dash cos phi dash is equal to 0. So this we actually deduced from the trigonometric relation by satisfying the trigonometric relations and from the geometry of the Mohr circle. And this was actually earlier we have actually when we have done with relation between the Kf line and Mohr Coulomb failure envelope, and this also can be expressed in terms of principal stresses. And when we plot PQ plot with q is equal to sigma 1 minus sigma 3 dash by 2 and p is equal to sigma 1 plus sigma 3 dash by 2. When we plot, so when q is equal to sigma 1 minus sigma 3 dash by 2 and p is equal to sigma 1 plus sigma 3 dash by 2, when we plot, this is the Kf line and which is actually inclined at an angle psi. So when we compare typical Mohr circle and this thing, when we said that sin phi dash is equal to tan psi and c dash is equal to a by cos phi. So by using this also we can get the the other form of tau is equal to c plus sigma tan phi as sigma 1 minus sigma 3 dash by 2 is equal to c cos phi plus sigma 1 plus sigma 3 by 2 sin phi dash. So with this also we will able to get the expression which we are talking here, sigma 1 minus sigma 3 dash minus sigma 1 plus sigma 3 sigma 1 dash plus sigma 3 dash sin phi dash minus 2c dash cos phi dash is equal to 0. Now with no order implied by the principal stresses sigma 1, sigma 2, sigma 3, the Mohr Coulomb criterion can be written as in the form of this 6 equations, and this represent two equations, this represent 2 equations, this represent 2 equations, wherein this is nothing but plus or minus sigma 1 minus sigma 2 by 2 is equal to a into sigma 1 plus sigma 2 by 2 plus b, plus or minus sigma 2 minus sigma 3 by 2 is equal to a into sigma 2 plus sigma 3 by 2 plus b, and plus or minus sigma 3 minus sigma 1 by 2 is equal to a into sigma 3 plus sigma 1 by 2 plus b, where a is equal to m minus 1 by m plus 1, that is a is equal to m minus 1 by m plus 1, and m is equal to c naught by t naught, which is nothing but 1 plus sin phi dash by 1 minus sin phi dash, and b is equal to 1 by 1 m plus 1 and c naught is equal to m by m plus 1, where t naught is equal to c naught by 2 into 1 minus sin phi dash, where a is actually within 0 to 1, that is 0 less than or equal to a is within 0 less than or equal to a less than 1. So the values of this c naught and t naught are actually depicted here, the c naught and t naught are depicted here, and which is shown here, the c naught by t naught, which is nothing but the ratio of these two, c naught by t naught, and this is the typical Mohr Coulomb failure envelope with a Mohr circle C and Mohr circle D. So we have said that these 6 equations are there, and wherein we actually have got a is equal to m minus 1 by m plus 1, m is equal to c naught by t naught, and b is equal to 1 by m plus 1, where c naught is equal to m by m plus 1 and t naught is equal to c naught by 2 into 1 minus sin phi, and where a is in between 0 to 1. So this T naught is the theoretical Mohr Coulomb uniaxial tensile strength, and that is on the negative side of the Mohr circle, you can see that in tau sigma plot, and that is not observed in experiments, rather a much lower strength T is measured, and sigma 1 is equal to 0 and sigma 2 is equal to, that is a sigma 1 is equal to 0 and sigma 2 is equal to minus T, that is actually shown here. So with the failure plane being normal to sigma 3 plane, so sigma 1 plane is here and the sigma 3 plane here, so the failure plane being normal to the sigma 3 plane. So the C naught is the theoretical Mohr Coulomb uniaxial compressive strength. So C naught is the theoretical Mohr Coulomb uniaxial compressive strength. C naught is the theoretical Mohr Coulomb uniaxial compressive strength. Now the shape of the failure surface in principal stress space is depend upon the form of failure criterion. So, the shape of the failure surface in principal stress space is depend upon the form of the failure criterion. Linear functions map as planes and nonlinear functions as curvilinear surfaces. So, the shape of the failure surface in principal stress space is dependent on the form of failure criterion. Primarily it is linear functions map as planes and nonlinear functions as curvilinear surfaces. So, the following 6 equations, the equations which we have said which we just discussed are represented by 6 planes that intersect one another along the 6 edges defining the hexagonal pyramid. So, the following 6 equations which are actually discussed just now are represented by the 6 planes that intersect one another along the 6 edges of the defining a hexagonal pyramid. So, that is these 6 edges which are actually defining this hexagonal pyramid. These equations actually represent the 6 planes that intersect one another along 6 edges defining the hexagonal pyramid. So, this is the failure surface, that means that this is the failure surface and this is the hydrostatic axis, say where sigma 1 is equal to sigma 2 is equal to sigma 3, and this is the failure surface on equipressure on the equipressure plane sigma 1 plus sigma 2 plus sigma 3 is equal to constant, or pi plane. This is also called as the pi plane perpendicular to the hydrostatic axis. So, perpendicular to the hydrostatic axis. If you take the projection of this one, you will have this is the pyramid surface which is hexagonal pyramid surface and which is also called as the pi plane, which is actually perpendicular to the hydrostatic axis, and where Mohr-Coulomb criterion can be described as irregular hexagon with sides of equal length, where Mohr-Coulomb criterion can be described as irregular hexagon with sides of equal length. So, here the pyramidal surface in principal stress space and cross section equipressure plane is actually given here, and these the equations which are shown here, they actually represent all the 6 edges which are forming the hexagonal pyramid surface, and the failure surface on the equipressure, that is sigma 1 plus sigma 2 plus sigma 3 is equal to constant, or a phi plane perpendicular to the hydrostatic axis, where the Mohr-Coulomb criterion, Mohr-Coulomb can be described as irregular hexagon with sides of equal length. So, this is the irregular hexagon with is actually shown once again here, where this is the hydrostatic axis and here is the point where the sigma 2 dash is there. So, isotropy requires threefold symmetry because an interchange of sigma 1, sigma 2, sigma 3 should not influence the failure surface for an isotropic material. So, if you have got isotropic material, the requires threefold symmetry because of an interchange of sigma 1, sigma 2, 3 should not influence the failure surface for an isotropic material. Note that the failure surface need only be given in any angle in any of the one of the 60 degrees regions, that is one of the 60 degrees regions, that is what actually is shown here. So, note that the failure surface need only be given in any one of the 60 degrees regions, and Mohr-Coulomb failure surface is irregular hexagon in principal stress space. Now, consider the transformation from principal stress space sigma 1, sigma 2, 3 to Mohr diagram sigma tau. So, although the radial distance from the hydrostatic axis to the stress point is proportional to the deviated stress, a point in principal stress space does not directly indicate the value of the shear stress on a plane. However, each point on the failure surface in principal stress space corresponds to Mohr circle tangent to the failure envelope. So, though the radial distance from the hydrostatic axis to the stress point is proportional to the deviatoric stress, a point in the principal stress space does not directly indicate the value of the shear stress on a plane. However, each point on the failure surface in principal stress corresponds to a Mohr circle tangent to the failure envelope. So, further extending the discussion, for the particular case where sigma 2 is in the intermediate principal stress in the order sigma 1 dash greater than sigma 2 dash greater than sigma 3 dash, or sigma 1 dash greater than sigma 1 dash greater than sigma 1 greater than sigma 2 greater than sigma 3, the failure surface is given by the side ACD of the hexagonal pyramid. The failure surface is given by the side ACD of the pyramid, that is the side ACD of the pyramid, ACD of the pyramid here, which is actually shown in the surface ACD. D is this point sigma 2 dash. The principal stresses at point D represent the stress state for a triaxial compression test, where sigma 1 and sigma 2 is equal to sigma 3 at point D, and at point D is given by circle D in the Mohr circle diagram. The point D that is given by the Mohr circle D, which is actually shown here. So this is the Mohr circle which is actually shown here, point D. This is the Mohr circle D. Similarly, for point C with principal stresses sigma 3 and sigma 1 is equal to sigma 2 associated with the triaxial extension test, Mohr circle C depicts the stress state where point D and C can be viewed as the extremes of the intermediate stress variation. So the where points D and C can be seen as the extremes of the intermediate stress variation, and the normal and shear stresses correspond to failure are given by points DF and CF. So this indicates the the CF and DF indicates the extremes of the intermediate stress variation. So it can be seen that the CF and DF will give the failure points, and so for this is for the triaxial test, and where Mohr circle C depicts the stress state and points D and C can be viewed as the extremes of the intermediate stress variation, and the normal and shear stresses correspond to failure are given by points DF and CF, and points lying on the line CD on the pyramidal failure surface will be represented by circles between C and D. So points lying on the line CD, that is this, they are represented by represented by circles between C and D. That is, we are actually talking about circles between C and D, circles between C and D. And as can be seen, this hexagonal pyramidal surface has the corners that may sometimes create problems in computations, and however this particular difficulty is quite easily overcome by introducing a local rounding of the corners according to Griffiths 1990. So the Mohr Coulomb in space, that is principal stress space, Mohr Coulomb in principal stress space, which is hexagonal pyramid surface, has corners that may be sometimes create problems in computation. So this particular difficulty is quite easily can be overcome by the introducing local rounding of the corners according to Griffiths 1990. So as we have discussed, the other way of describing tau is equal to sigma plus tan phi in terms of principal stresses, as F is equal to sigma 1 dash minus sigma 3 dash minus sigma 1 dash plus sigma 3 dash sin phi dash minus 2c dash cos phi dash is equal to 0. So this can be obtained further in order to make attempts to derive a consistency conditions of the Mohr Coulomb in vacuum space with P dash is equal to where specific volume is equal to 1 plus E and P dash is equal to 1 by 3 sigma 1 dash plus sigma 2 dash plus sigma 3 dash, and Q is equal to square root of sigma 1 dash minus sigma 2 dash whole square plus sigma 2 minus sigma 3 dash whole square plus sigma 1 dash minus sigma 3 dash whole square. So the whole divided by 2, and for triaxial conditions, as well we have said when we have got a triaxial sample that is a cylindrical sample, sigma 2 dash is equal to sigma 3 dash. When we have this sigma 2 dash is equal to sigma 3 dash, and what we get is that P dash is equal to 1 by 3 sigma 1 dash plus 2 sigma 3 dash, and Q is equal to sigma 1 dash minus sigma 3 dash. So when we put this into this we get simplified to q is equal to sigma 1 dash minus sigma 3 dash and p is equal to 1 by 3 sigma 1 dash plus 2 sigma 3. Now by substituting these here we can write sigma 1 dash is equal to 3p dash minus 2 sigma 3 dash. So sigma 1 dash can be written as 3p dash minus 2 sigma 3 dash. So if you put p dash is equal to 1 by 3 into sigma 1 dash 1 by 3 into sigma 1 dash plus 2 sigma 3, we will get sigma 1 dash, and sigma 3 dash is equal to sigma 1 minus q, and if you substitute q is equal to sigma 1 dash minus sigma 3 dash, we will get sigma 3. So by using these values with sigma 1 dash is equal to 3p dash minus 2 sigma 3 dash and sigma 3 dash is equal to sigma 1 dash minus q, and substituting in this particular equation, and what we get is that the sigma 1 dash is equal to 3p dash minus when you substitute for sigma 3 dash here, what we get is that sigma 1 dash is equal to 3p dash minus 2 sigma 1 dash plus 2q, and where with this we can write sigma 1 dash as 3p dash plus 2q by 3, where p dash is equal to sigma 1 dash plus 2 sigma 3 dash by 3 and q is equal to sigma 1 dash minus sigma 3 sigma 1 dash minus sigma 3 dash, and similarly sigma 3 dash is equal to sigma 1 minus q, and by substituting these values we get 3p dash minus q by 3. So with this what we can write is that sigma 1 dash plus sigma 3 dash is equal to, when you add these two, sigma 1 dash plus sigma 3 dash is equal to 6p dash plus q by 3. So sigma 1 dash plus sigma 3 dash is equal to 6p dash plus q by 3, and which is when we add to this, what we get is that when you substitute in this equation, sigma 1 minus sigma 3, that is nothing but q is equal to sin phi plus 6p dash plus q by 3 plus 2c cos phi. So by simplifying this we get 3q is equal to 6p dash sin pi plus q sin phi plus 6c cos phi. So what we get is that 3q when you do the cross multiplication is equal to 6p dash sin pi plus q sin phi plus 6c cos phi. So the equation actually has got pi dash, and here also pi dash, and here also pi dash, and here also pi dash and pi dash. So q is equal to 6 sin phi dash divided by 3 minus sin phi dash into p dash plus 6c cos pi dash divided by 3 minus sin phi dash. So this is actually indicated as q is equal to n the nu p dash plus c star, nu p dash plus c star, where nu is equal to 6 sin phi by 3 minus sin phi dash and c star is equal to 6c cos phi by 3 minus sin phi dash, where this is actually called as formulation for the Mohr-Coulomb model in PQ space. This is actually called as a formulation for the Mohr-Coulomb model in PQ space, and assuming that the flow rule and ideal plasticity condition, and we can write f is equal to f function of p dash q is equal to q minus nu p dash minus c star is equal to 0. So by taking the differentiation with respect to p dash, and dou f by dou p dash dp dash plus dou f by dou q into dq is equal to 0. So this is actually consistency condition which is called as far as the Mohr-Coulomb model in PQ space is concerned. So what we have done is that from the alternative way of expressing tau is equal to c plus sigma tan phi, which we have taken, and from from these considerations of by using these invariants, p dash is equal to 1/3 of sigma 1 dash plus sigma 2 dash plus sigma 3 dash by 3, and q is equal to root over sigma 1 minus sigma 1 dash minus sigma 2 dash whole square plus sigma 2 dash minus sigma 3 dash whole square plus sigma 1 dash minus sigma 3 dash whole square by 2, and when for triaxial conditions when you put sigma 2 dash is equal to sigma 3 dash, we get p dash is equal to 1/3 of sigma 1 plus 2 sigma 3 dash, and q is equal to sigma 1 minus sigma 3 dash. So what we have written is that we have written this sigma 1 dash is equal to 3 p dash minus 2 sigma 3 dash. So, this is actually expressed in terms of sigma 1 dash is equal to 3 p dash minus 2 q sigma 3 dash, and this is actually expressed as q is equal to that is sigma 1 dash minus sigma 3 dash. So, sigma 3 dash is equal to sigma 1 minus q. So, that is what actually we have written. Then what we have done is that sigma 1 dash is equal to 3 p dash minus 2 sigma 1 dash plus 2 q. So, we actually substituted for sigma 3 dash sigma 1 minus q, and then expressed in terms of p and q, that is sigma 1 dash is equal to 3 p dash plus 2 q by 3, and similarly when we have taken sigma 3 dash is equal to 3 p dash minus 2 sigma 3 dash minus q, and with that we have got 3 p dash minus q by 3, and then added sigma 1 dash plus sigma 3 dash, then we have got sigma 1 plus sigma 3 is equal to 6 p dash plus q by 3. When you add sigma 1 dash plus sigma 3 dash, we have got in terms of p dash and q, where p dash is equal to sigma 1 dash plus 2 sigma 3 dash by 3 and q is equal to sigma 1 minus sigma 3 dash, we get 6 p dash plus q by 3. Now, this particular expression, which is for q it is sigma 1 for sigma 1 minus sigma 3, this is actually replaced by q, and then sigma 1 plus sigma 3 was actually replaced by 6 p dash plus q by 3, and then simplification yielded a consistency Mohr Coulomb model in the PQ space, which is q is equal to n that nu p dash plus c star, where mu is equal to this particular coefficient, that is 6 sin phi dash divided by 3 minus sin phi dash, and c star is equal to 6c cos phi dash by 3 minus sin phi. So, f is equal to the formulation for Mohr Coulomb model in PQ space can be expressed as q minus nu p dash minus c star is equal to 0, and assuming the associated flow rule in and ideal plasticity, which we have started with by idealizing the geometrical in case of Mohr Coulomb criterion, where a function of p dash q is equal to q minus nu p dash minus c star is equal to 0, which is dou f by dou p dash dp dash plus dou f by dou q dq is equal to 0, which is actually called as the consistency condition. Now, some limitations of Mohr Coulomb theory, this we have discussed, but we are again elaborating. So, one of the primary limitations we actually said is that the Mohr envelope is is a curve, and the Coulomb equation is a straight line. So, within the usual range of the experimental range in the laboratory, what has been done is that it is actually assumed as a circular that is for the that is within the usual experimental range in the laboratory. So, possible overestimation of the safety factor for the slope stability calculations can be interpreted, and difficulties in calibration because of the linearization. So, we actually have taken linearization. So, there are some difficulties in the calibration, and then second is that the effect of the intermediate principal stress sigma 2 dash on the condition at failure, though we actually discussed that it is not influencing the failure, but it is obvious that sigma 2 can have no influence on the conditions at failure for Mohr failure criterion, and no matter what magnitude it has. So, though in the Mohr Coulomb criterion it is actually stated as a limitation, but it is obvious that sigma 2 can have no influence on the conditions at failure, and no matter what is the whatever is the magnitude of the sigma 2, and the intermediate principal stress sigma 2 probably does have an influence on in real soil, but the Mohr Coulomb failure theory does not consider it. In real soil it may have influence, but the Mohr Coulomb failure theory does not consider it. And Mohr Coulomb failure criterion is well proven for most of the geometrials, but data for clays is still contradictory. That is one of the limitation. And the soils on shearing exhibit variable volume change characteristics depending upon the pre-consolidation pressure, and which cannot be accounted with the Mohr Coulomb theory. and in soft soils volumetric plastic strains on shearing are compressive, that is negative dilation takes place, while the Mohr Coulomb model will predict continuous dilation. So, in soft soils or loose sands, the volumetric plastic strains on shearing are compressive in nature, that is they undergo negative dilation, and whilst the Mohr Coulomb model will predict the continuous dilation. Mohr Coulomb model predict the continuous dilation. So, this is also stated as one of the limitations of the Mohr Coulomb theory. Now, the definition of failure when we further connect ourselves to friction and interlocking concept. In order to connect that, let us look into what is the definition of failure. And failure along a plane in a material occurs by critical combination of normal and shear stress, that is when we have tau is equal to function of sigma and tau is equal to C plus sigma tan phi. The shear stress is the function of material cohesion or a soil inherent strength, and an angle of internal friction. So, this internal friction can be due to the sliding friction, but the sliding which actually can happens between two particles, or also due to interlocking, that is when one particle get locked into other particle, and then there is depends upon the shape of the particle, like an angularity, and then the angularity and size of the particles. So, the failure along a plane in a material occurs by critical combination of normal and shear stress, where tau is equal to C plus sigma tan phi, where shear stress is the function of material cohesion C and angle of internal friction phi. So, if you look into the in the definition of failure, when we have got tau sigma envelope, and when you have a point A, stress point A, and this is actually said that it is stable, no failure occurs, and but when actually the no shear failure occurs for A, and but when it is actually on the failure envelope, and when it is actually on the failure envelope, then it is the shear failure occurs, and this is the tau is equal to function of sigma is actually represented here, and when it is here, that means that the stress state cannot exist above the failure envelope, that means that the failure would have already taken place, Similarly, when we draw the Mohr circle above the failure envelope, that implies that the failure would have already taken place. So, the point C is cannot exist, and at point B which is at failure, and point A is actually stable, the safe against the failure. Now, we can also look into the flow rule for Mohr Coulomb for dilatancy angle, and for Mohr Coulomb flow rule is defined through the dilatancy angle of the soil, where G of sigma dash is equal to tau minus sigma dash and tan psi dash minus constant is equal to 0. So, this is the plastic potential function. So, this is the for the dilatancy angle. So, G sigma dash is equal to tau minus sigma dash and tan psi dash minus constant is 0, where psi dash is the dilatancy angle, and which is actually less than the angle of internal friction, and which is less than the angle of internal friction. Now, the interlocking concept and its interpretations, when we look into it, the frictional soil behavior is mainly influenced by the two factors. One is frictional resistance or sliding resistance between the shear two particles upon shearing, and to expand the soil against the confining pressure. So, then the soil which actually can get undergo increase in volume upon the shear under confining pressure. So, and angular friction can be defined as pi is equal to phi u plus beta, where angle of sliding friction between the mineral surfaces and beta is the effect of interlocking, where that is also a combination which is can be said as because of the angularity of the particles and all. So, where phi is equal to phi u plus beta, where phi is the angle of sliding friction between the mineral surfaces, and beta is the effect of internal interlocking. So, the phi varies with the nature of the packing of the soil. So denser the packing, higher is the value of phi. The denser the packing, that is the in a given volume, if there are more number of particles are there, then it is called as denser packing, higher is the value of pi. If phi u for a given soil is constant and B must change with the denseness of the soil particle. So if phi u for a given soil is constant, let us say for a particular angularity, particular shape, and if it is constant, B must change with the denseness of the soil particle. So B increases with increasing denseness of the soil, and because more work to be done to overcome the effect of interlocking. So because the particles are get locked in a dense configuration, the soil actually has to work a lot in order to undergo this movement, and so beta increases with increasing the denseness of the soil due to shear, and because more work to be done to overcome the effect of interlocking, which actually arises due to shear. So the effect of the angularity of the soil particles, if you look into it, soil possessing angular soil particles will show high friction angle. Effect of angularity of the soil particles, if you look into it, soil possessing angular soil particles will show high friction angles than that of rounded soil particles, because angular soil particles will show a greater degree of interlocking and higher value of beta. So the so called this beta will be high for angular soil particles because of the greater degree of interlocking and higher value of beta. Now further, the interlocking concept with interpretations with dilation. So if you look into that, here beta is the function of the the dilation of the function of the dilatancy of the soil. So if you take a loose arrangement of the grains, if you take a spherical grain, and you can see that these are the void spaces. So when they are subjected to a vertical in the vertical stress and a shear in the horizontal direction, and if this is the case, the soil actually undergoes a negative dilation, in the sense that the soil undergoes a compression, and which actually takes place like this. So this is called as a negative dilation. So the volume decreases here, but here when you have the soil particles which are actually dense, then you can see that there is the increase in the volume, then there is an increase in the volume takes place. So this interlocking concept and interpretations can be interpreted by taking seesaw concept or analogy, wherein when we take this into consideration, then we can see that the so called the dilatancy angle and other concepts can be discussed. So the interlocking concept and interpretation with the dilation: for loose sand the volume decreases with shearing, for loose sand the volume decreases with the shearing, that is called what we calling a negative dilation, and for dense sand the volume initially very marginally decreases, and then thereafter it shows actually an increase in the dilation. So this is increase in the volume upon shearing. So this shows that in this actually the tendency of this dilatancy decreases with increase in the confining pressure, So let us consider the interlocking concept and interpretations where dilation and direct shear response. As we said that one of the tests if you do by using for determining the shear strength of the soil is the direct shear. That means that you will be placing a soil mass in a box and then two boxes, and when we allow the box to undergo movement, then you can see that the shear is actually applied along the predetermined failure plane, which is horizontal. So here this is for a dense sand, a typical variation for dense sand, where Q by P versus X, the deflection. So Q is the shear force and P is the normal force, and so this is for dense sand and this is for the loose sand. So loose sand actually has undergone there is a compression and then a dense sand. So here where it can be seen that where it can be seen that the shear which actually undergoes a movement with this we can actually calculate what is the the friction angle with reference to application of this the so called the dilation. So here the total work done is equal to dW which is nothing but P into delta y, that is in the vertical direction, P into delta y in the vertical direction, and Q delta x, that is in the horizontal direction. So delta x is the horizontal movement in the x direction, and delta y is the vertical movement in the vertical direction. So work done is, net work done is equal to P into delta y and Q into delta x. So we can write P delta y plus Q delta x is equal to, is counted by mu P delta x, that is the friction which actually mobilized along this one. So by dividing delta y by delta x is equal to mu minus Q by P. When you simplify this, what we get is that delta y by delta x is equal to mu Q by P, and which is nothing but tan psi, and where tan psi is equal to tan phi m is minus tan phi c, where phi c is equal to tan inverse mu. So this alternatively we can say that phi m is equal to phi c plus psi. So what we have done is that with reference to interlocking concept and interpretation, the total work done is equal to dW is equal to P delta y plus Q delta x, and then we divided right through by delta x, and with that we have got delta y by delta x plus Q is equal to mu P, and then when you simplify further, and what we have got is that delta y by delta x is equal to mu, that is due to sliding friction, by minus Q by P, and is equal to tan inverse psi. Tan inverse psi is nothing but the so called inclination of this one, that is called the delta y by delta x, and which is nothing but tan psi is equal to tan phi m, that is the due to friction, minus tan phi c, that is because of the interlocking, and so with that phi c is equal to tan inverse mu, phi c is equal to tan inverse mu, and which we have written here, and alternately we can write phi m is equal to phi c plus psi. So phi m is equal to phi c psi, that is what actually we have said from the deliberation discussed just now. So how to understand this so called dilatancy? So why do we get volume changes when I apply the shear stresses? And this can be explained with a simple analogy, which is a saw blade analogy. You can see that the orientation of the these planes, they are upward, and this is the shear direction and this is the normal stress, and similarly what will happen is that when the particles are under a dense configuration, when it is subjected to shear, the particles will raid on another particle and be subjected to a similar analogical movement. So the analogy was actually been brought between the interlocking saw blades and dense packing of the grains. So the simple analogy we can actually correlate is that interlocking saw blades with the dense packing of the grains, when they are actually subjected to shear, the inclination of that interlocking plane blades is the dilation angle, and this angle and that angle is actually represented here. This is psi and this is psi. So it is phi is equal to psi plus phi m, that is the due to friction. The apparent externally mobilized angle of friction on horizontal planes phi is larger than the angle of friction resisting the sliding on the inclined planes. So the strength is equal to friction plus dilatancy. So it is actually nothing but the actual strength of the soil is nothing but the friction plus dilatancy, the friction plus. So the angle of internal friction is not only that it actually has got only friction, but also as also the component of the dilatancy. Now this further can be the saw blade analogy can be extended to initially dense and critical and initially loose conditions. So you can see that in case of initially dense, the particles actually have no way to move except they have to raid on one another. So the raiding of the particles takes place on the one particle raid on another particle and this particle raid on another particle. So the orientation of the C sub blade can be seen on the upward direction. In case of critical condition where you can see that is horizontal, but in case of say initially loose soil, you can see that this is horizontal, this is inclined down, that means that it actually undergoes the compression. So when the soil is initially denser than the critical state, it must achieve then as particles slide past each other owing to the imposed shear strain, they will average separate. So when a soil is initially denser than the critical state, it must achieve a denser configuration, then as the particles slide each other owing to the imposed shear strain, then they actually have got a tendency to separate. The particle movements will spread about an angle, and that is actually called as dilation. So see the orientation of the saw blade here. So this is analogy, and this is actually what happens in the soil, in the real soil. And when you have the orientation which is actually the initially loose soil, when the soil is initially looser than the final critical state, then the particles will tend to get closer together as the soil is disturbed, and the average angle of dilation will be negative, indicating a contraction. So that is why the saw blade inclination or plane of inclination is actually shown below. So this is initially loose soil tend to become denser here. And when we have have a place where it is constant, in the sense that critical state, if the density of the soil does not, so in the critical state is the where no volume change occurs. So if the density of the soil does not have to change in order to reach a critical state, then there is a zero dilatancy as the soil shear at constant volume. So the soil shear takes place at a constant volume. So it is important to realize that the critical state is only reached when the particles they have the full opportunity to juggle around and then come into the new configuration. So if the confining stress is increased where the particles are being moved around, then they will tend to finish up in a more compact state. So we have seen for initially dense state, initially loose state, and also in a critical state. And in the critical state, what we are saying is that if the density of the soil does not have to change in order to reach a critical state, then there is a zero dilatancy as the soil shear at constant volume. And it is important to realize that a critical state is only reached when the particles have had full opportunity to juggle around and come into new configurations. So if the confining stress is increased when the particles are being moved around, then they will tend to finish up in a more compacted state. So in this particular lecture, we try to understand about the Mohr Coulomb in the pyramidal hexagonal surface, and also we discussed the consistency condition as far as the Mohr Coulomb condition is concerned, and thereafter we actually introduced ourselves to interlocking concept, and then we also said that introduced to that when the soils particularly in the dense soil or in a war consolid soil, and when it is when it undergoes shearing, and we said that it is going to experience a phenomenon and which is called dilation, and that angle is called dilation angle, and that is actually the phenomenon is called dilatancy, and the angle which is called the psi, the dilatancy angle, and this dilatancy angle decreases, the suppressment of the dilatancy or dilation phenomenon can be observed once there is an increase in the normal stress. So we will further discuss in the forthcoming lecture after having introduced about the the different methods for determining the shear strength, and further we will connect with the stress paths.